The Whelen 1200 F head or G head, otherwise known as the senior strobe when it came out. I have a few of them, and I have found a couple different varieties, probably more than a couple. It was one of Whelen's first full-size strobes and served as the internal light diffuser for the 5000 Commander, as well as serving on crossbars as a standalone. And it continued to be their larger sized, both remote and self-contained strobe beacon up until the late 90s when the name stayed but the form changed. They were definitely a major part of the Whelen Strobe lineup, and they were featured on both crossbars and other applications, anywhere from dump trucks to rear tailboard fire trucks, all the way up to single units on emergency vehicles, 120 volt versions. But the 1200 and the G head both have the spun base. The 1200 is just self-contained. The G head is remote. That's the 1999 version of the self-contained 1200. And here's the F and G heads, which would be the remote versions, the earlier versions. And then you get your F and your G head of the 1999 change, still representing a similar size strobe, similar applications. The G assembly, like I said, goes back almost as far as you can trace strobes crossing from aircraft over to vehicles. And they were called senior strobes to start, but like I said, the 1200 F and G designations came along pretty quickly. There were two basic lens types. One was directional and had a front. And this one shown just now did not. It was omnidirectional. The front it was just the way the fluting worked. They did come with a cruise light option until you got to the 1999 version, in which case you didn't have that cruise light option anymore. But as I'll talk about later, there was another similar option. The cruise light was $20 to add one in the 80s, and it worked just like pretty much any other cruise light. And early on, you could actually do dual cruise lights because you could do that on the 5000 beacon, which was the insert in the 5000 was actually the same thing with the middle cutout. So the dual cruise lights were something that was kind of a port over between the two. We all know what cruise lights are. They were offered in a variety of Whelen products for a long time. You can still actually get LED cruise lights, which are dim, steady burn lights, even in modern lights from Whelen. As stated earlier, when the 1200 changed forms, a different option came along, and that was Strobe Plus, which was the Snow, Sun, Fog product line, which flashed a incandescent or halogen bulb in time with the strobe bulb. It was like a cruise light, but it flashed and it was synchronized with the strobe. You could get that in the Super Strobe and in the 1200. I have a Super Strobe with this option enabled, and it works quite well. It does what it's supposed to do. LEDs kind of killed this feature, but it was a flashing cruise light essentially, and it was electronically timed to illuminate with the strobe pulse. So the question would be, what is this? I got this G series light from online, and you can see it's got the 2 cruise lights, but what's that extra light? There was no strobe plus option for the older, especially this old version of the G head. And as you can see, this actually, that's a normal one. This one gives the option of flashing the cruise lights against the extra light, or steady burning the cruise lights and just flashing the extra light. It came wired that way. The wiring was in rough shape. I did rehabilitate the wiring. I can't really tell exactly. I believe they raised the bulbs of the cruise light and the strobe up to accommodate this flashing bulb. The socket is very well done. I don't think it's factory, but it was done very well. It's not a shoddy install job, and it kind of does what it's supposed to do. The overall rest of the light, the other components are raised up just slightly, and I believe that is to accommodate that third incandescent bulb. It actually is recessed into the metal mounting pan, whereas the strobe and the cruise lights are raised up, and usually on one of these metal spun pan styles, the main lights would be flush. Underneath, all I did was heat shrink some stuff, clean up some wiring, replace some bad connections. I didn't really change the spirit of whoever did this. It does exactly what it did when I got it. So it's pretty much the same thing. Like I said, the workmanship is good. It almost looks factory. I really don't think it is, but it almost looks good enough to be factory. But the flashing of the incandescent does not in any way synchronize with the strobe. So there's a lot of ways that the 5000 and the FG and 1200 mounted their cruise lights and their strobes. There were spun raised mounts, there were flat mounts, there were single cruise, dual cruise, and it varied quite a bit, but the height of the bulbs were always the same. And in this particular case, they're not. But like you see here, 2 different type bases, but the bulb height equals out. And that doesn't really play through to the odd light that I got. There's, like I said, there's many different styles of ways to fill a 1200 or G or F head, and the spun version is the one that can also go in the 5000 commander beacon. But as you can see, the bulbs are still held at the same height, no matter which type of base insert you use. However, on the version that I'm looking at, the bulbs are raised up slightly. They are a little bit higher off the spun base, and usually, like I said, they'd be flush. Is that important? I mean, I would think it would be. However, in overall brightness, it's hard to notice a difference. It's also not apples to apples. But if you can see here, the red box is the sweet spot for the intended sweet spot for the normal strobe bulb. And the blue is where the main flash of the light I'm talking about would actually hit. The DMS strobe was a cut down version, and it even has that sort of middle sweet spot. So this is what they look like illuminated for primary and secondary flash strobe. it's really hard to get a good idea of actual perceived brightness. I don't think there's much of a difference in the strobe. The bulb probably makes more of a difference than the actual the height difference, which is like a 1/4 inch maybe. Maybe the base of the non-stock one is a little dimmer. It's really hard to say, but you get pretty good light output with both. I don't think that raising it mattered a lot. However, in the cruise light department, the altered one kind of lacks a little bit. And I don't know if that's the height or if that's the fact that we have added another incandescent bulb and it's just getting in the way. So when I first got this device, I set about figuring out what it did. I had actually already rewired it at this point, but right now it is in flash against mode where the extra light was flashing against the cruise lights, and then you can see you can solid illuminate the cruise lights and flash just the flashing bulb. You have the option, so you could leave the cruise lights illuminated and flash the extra bulb, or you could flash both. So I'm going to break this down, take it apart, kind of show what it looks like inside, how it looks a lot like a strobe plus or snow sun fog version to me, even though there's no synchronization whatsoever between the strobe and the incandescent bulb. And it's a remote light head, so I suppose I could technically hook it up to a halogen strobe synchronized power supply. Those were not a thing when this was made. The lens and the parts tell me this was early 80s, so that wasn't a thing. So that wouldn't really be accurate. So I don't know what the intention here was. Perhaps this was on a forklift or security vehicle, and they wanted the ability to have a little bit more attention getting cruise light without turning on the strobe. I can see it being advantageous to be used without the strobe. It kind of loses a little bit with the strobe activated, but if you ran the cruise either steady and flashed the extra bulb or flashed the cruise against the extra bulb, I can see how that might be a good sort of like tour light for doing like a security parking checks. But the strobe itself, I think maybe suffers a little bit from the flashing halogen. It kind of, or incandescent rather, it kind of takes away from the strobe flash almost. It certainly doesn't help it. So I have to think this was a modification that was intended for the primary use to be flashing that extra bulb and using the cruise lights while flashing that bulb, or even flashing them against each other. I'm not sure how it was wired. It could have been wired to flash them against each other until you turned the strobes on, and then it might have put the cruise lights back when the strobe was activated. I can tell you that the way it's wired, you have your choice. You can flash them against each other, or leave the cruises steady and flash the extra. You can't steady the extra and you can't cruise light all three of them. So I don't know exactly the intended purpose here. I think one of the ways this may be problematic is the cruise light bulbs are very close to the strobe bulb. Not that they're not usually, but they're a little extra close in this case, it looks like. The flashing bulb is off-centered, and these are a front-focused dome. The way the fluting inside is set up, they're focused front, so depending on where you oriented that bulb, that flashing bulb, would have an effect on whether it was a more diffuse flash or a more concentrated flash. So I don't know how they had the dome oriented either, so that could play into it. Overall, I would be curious to see when this modification was made, and whether or not it was something that was a field modification or a fleet modification. I really don't think it was a Whelen special order, but it was definitely made using factory parts. Down to the little standoffs for the cruise lights. Things are just a little different. You can see there's a screw hole in the base of the spun riser there, which makes me think it is stolen from a Commander 5000 beacon, because those are the only ones that have those holes usually. However, because they were used for both, sometimes they would sneak through into the FG and 1200 series with those screw holes that would make them Commander 5000 innards. So that's not a definitive thing. It's also possible that this was in a Commander 5000 and later moved to this housing. So that's also possible. This particular spun insert could very easily be dropped into a 5000 Commander. The internal optic would be essentially the exact same thing as the outer dome on this light, with just a hole cut in the top. So this may have been ported over from a 5000 Commander. I'm not really sure, or it may just have been purchased that way. There's a lot of extra holes in this particular spun internal. Don't recognize them to being specific to the 5000 or to the 1200, the F, the G, or anything like that. So I'm not really sure how much and what type of homebrew we're dealing with. And like I said, I'm not sure the orientation of the domes. So I used my best guess when orienting the domes. I oriented the dome with the flashing incandescent to the front. That may have been a mistake. It might have worked better to orient it to the rear so it was more diffuse versus the little kind of hot spot you're seeing there. I'm not sure if that mistake made it less effective. It is offset anyway, so maybe it was supposed to be to the rear. I'm not really sure. Regardless, it doesn't do a whole lot when the strobe is activated, so I'm guessing that this was a feature that was used when you weren't using the strobe. Again, this is just all guesses on my part. I suppose I could turn the domes a little bit and see if I get different results. Less dark spots, less hot spots, things like of that nature. I guess I'm not that concerned about it. I think I can surmise from what I've seen that you're going to get a hot spot no matter what with where that bulb is. And it's that it just is what it is. The more I dug around in it, the more I started to wonder if the middle was stolen from a Commander 5000. But I really got nothing to back that up other than the screw holes in the spun internal base there, or the aluminum internal riser base. I did play around on the bench with this a decent amount. I think if I set this up with switches, I would set it up so that it was a 2-position switch where one position flashes the cruise against the extra incandescent, and then the next position activates the strobe and the cruise and gets rid of the flashing incandescent. Make it like a 2-mode light. However, part of me also wants to be able to leave the cruise lights on and flash the incandescent, so the flashing incandescent would override. So I guess theoretically you could do separate switches, just knowing that you would get an override if you went to flashing incandescent. There's a lot of different ways you could set this up, depending on what your intention was, I guess. I think overall, the only thing I'll say for sure is that I don't like the flashing incandescent bulb when the strobe is firing. I think it's counterproductive, and I think whatever setup I would do, I would switch off the flashing extra incandescent in strobe mode. I think with the cruise lights either illuminated and the extra bulb flashing, that's a viable proposition. And I don't think flashing the extra bulb against the cruise lights really looks that much different. You're still getting a technically near 100% dwell time, so it really doesn't look a lot different. Again, the incandescent flashing with the strobe on, I think, is gratuitous and washes things out. If anything, I'm definitely would not run the strobe and the flasher at the same time. So I think we'd cut the flasher off to flash the strobe and just do cruise lights. So whatever this is, wherever it came from, whoever made it, if anybody has any idea, put a comment down below. Some of the wiring, like I said, I replaced, but everything looked very well done, near factory good. So this is certainly an interesting one. There's a lot of possibilities of origin. So add a comment if you think you know. As always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.